we also came to the idea that coming up with some transcendental principle can be helpful to sort of make mental and ideational sense of these wild drives and how to use them, and sort of like a formal system of ideas that can help us with the reality of our body energy. So like you can think about this in the context of how religion might have emerged in history by saying like, okay, originally we were all basically primates and we were engaging in primate mating patterns. There was just these wild sexual drives. And then throughout history, due to social pressures, you needed some sort of system of values. You needed some sort of system of knowledge to basically exert pressure on these wild instincts and turn them into something practical, and also turning them into something ultimately transcendental. So one of the things we sort of said in the last trialogue was that one of the major pressures for the religious transcendental principle as it relates to sexuality is, guaranteeing paternity, for example. I know, because if you just have men wildly having sex everywhere, you have no idea who's the father and to track paternity and so forth. So you need some sort of system to track paternity, but also on the woman's side, you need that same paternal order to give them safety and security, like that they need commitment and investment in order to know that, okay, if I have this man's child, he's going to stick around long term and be able to provide for the children. So all of that kind of makes sense, like we start out with these wild evolutionary drives, and then you need some sort of religious structure, some sort of transcendental principle to bring it into a sort of a coherent order. Now, for this trialogue, I want to introduce kind of this opposite idea. Not only did religion evolve, but you need religion in order to evolve even further. So it flips it. So both religion evolved and maybe religion is necessary. And so I'm going to try and get into what that might mean. Here's the quote I want to share with you both from Slavoj Žižek again. Quote, "Humans cannot leave religion behind. We need its mirage to transgress it repeatedly. Religion is not just a historical phenomenon, but a kind of transcendental illusion immanent to the human mind." So there's two aspects of this basic quote, which is here Žižek is defining religion as a type of necessary illusion or image. And what this necessary illusion or image does is it guarantees a beyond, and its two main functions here are to support subjective engagement into that transcendental principle. So subjects who support this image and keep it moving. And two, another type of subjectivity, which is constantly trying to transgress it, to go beyond it. So you'll have subjects supporting the image and subjects transgressing, going beyond the image. And with this type of relationship, it's not only, again, the point here is not only that religion evolved through evolutionary pressures like we discussed, but also religion allows for new evolutions, paradoxically. In other words, we need and here's the essence, we need transcendental principles to both stabilize our identity and to go beyond our identity. So in that sense, what I see in the current landscape is like, when you get rid of religion, you have the re-emergence of the wild chaotic drives. And obviously what that means is we're missing kind of the transcendental principle of our era. But at the same time, there are a field of many different transcendental principles which kind of try to function in this way. Like, let me give the example, for example, of Friedrich Nietzsche's Overman. Friedrich Nietzsche's Overman critiqued religion, but at the same time proposed a transcendental principle in the Overman for the overcoming of what we are. You could also see the same thing with Karl Marx and communism, who also critiqued religion, but proposed his own transcendental principle in the idea of communism. And then you see the same thing today in, for example, the transhumanist movement, where they'll negate human existence itself, but they'll propose a transcendental principle of a superhuman or a human that's merged with AI. So in this sense, I think religion is a much more complex term than we give it credit for. And it might actually be something connected to this, presupposing some transcendental principle to overcome or stabilize our identity given our evolutionary history, and also to push beyond it to go where we've never been before. So in that sense, I'll just finally, before passing it to Kevin, I'll just say that for Zizek personally, he always emphasizes that he's an atheist. And what he means by atheism is that basically an authentic form of atheism experiences the radical absence of any transcendental guarantee. So in other words, if there's these two subjects, the subjects who support the transcendental illusion and the subjects who constantly are transgressing, going beyond it, in order to transgress and go beyond the transcendental illusion, you have to realize that what you're stepping into is a radical uncertainty. And what the transcendental illusion gives you is a type of certainty in identity. So with that sort of notion, hopefully this sets up an interesting dialogue on the relationship between our evolution and our religious impulse.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Well set up. It brings up a lot of different things. And I guess the first thing that I want to point out is that, I agree that religion is necessary in the evolutionary process. So I can imagine religion as a vehicle that we would get into. It's proverbial boat to cross the river, the great expanse of history, which I think human history has been a lot about creating meaningful values with which to guide a civilization. And a lot of this has to do with sexuality and mating, but it ultimately has to do with the existential terror or dread of knowing we're going to die. And the mortality issue is at the bedrock, I believe, of the search for meaning and the search for transcendent values upon which to base a human life, and therefore gain agency, gain meaning, and form polity, form culture around that as the center. And I think religion has done a really good job of this. And it's caused a lot of suffering at the same time. Because what we see in the major religions is often a promise of something beyond the material. There's often an emphasis on altruism. And there is a judgmental or shame complex that comes with it, whether it's God the Father judging you, or it's karma and the bodhisattvas and devas measuring you, or if it's some promise of virgins in the afterlife, if you do good deeds. This cause and effect is sort of built in. So when I think about religion as a vehicle, these transhumanists, even many militant atheists, probably not the kind that Zizek is, but some of these more extreme types, in their effort to fully reject religion, they create their own cult, often of personality, but it's a cult or culture that is their own religion. And Nietzsche, was the first one to really point this out in Western thinking. God is dead and we killed him. And the postmodern views, which were emerging at that time in Europe, post-Enlightenment, post-Renaissance, the human being was raised to the utmost, and technology and rationalism and global economies were dismantling some of the dark ages, which is an interesting thing about religion, at least the way the Christian religion is played out, is that it, for many centuries, actually stymied and retarded the growth of science, technology, of culture. So in a way, it was a de-evolutionary force. But what that actually did was set up conditions for a quantum leap when we get to the age of reason, the Enlightenment, and the Renaissance, because there's this massive cascade of innovation, culminating with the discovery of the New World, culminating with the great rise of the republics and the founding of America, the French Revolution, and the many wars and power plays in Europe. And this theme has followed us all the way to the present, where we're in a culture now that religion is paid lip service. It's kind of naive, or it's pandered to. And this is part of the existential struggle that man and the masculine has right now. masculine, I believe, being a being ordered on principles and directionality, orientation. And with the loss of these traditional religious structures, we have room for all kinds of wild and maladaptive and unhealthy things that have arisen in its place, such as identity politics and the worship of material and the almost religion of science now. Materialistic scientism is almost the new religion, where it shifted from saints and prayer and holy water to quarks, leptons, particle colliders, and factual research. And so I know we're all familiar with that with our brief stints, mine the briefest in academia. And I think this, I'll leave it here for Daniel. This may be one of the core tensions, is the real struggle we're seeing in the modern world, and 2020 is on blast, for establishing transcendental values and guiding forces that religion once provided.
Thank you, guys. Wonderful. I don't even know where to start. There's so much there. When it comes to think about science and religion, I used to think it in terms of time, because what do we have in science and the way that we can actually have certainty about evolution is always looking at the past. So that is like very, very crucial also to rationality itself. And when it comes to see major patterns that we have in different ways of religion, we also had an evolution of religion itself. And some of them are very much related to the possibility of experiencing time. And what I mean by that, I want to point out Pierre Levy that mentioned that we had like 4 major spaces, which he calls spaces, means that there are qualities of proximity. When we have been hunter and gatherers, the religion they had is very much linked to a spirit world that is very animalistic or totemistic, and sometimes even not having this distinction if we are kind of animals or there's a spirit in the animals that can appear to us. But the next space that he puts down is like the terrestrial, the territorial. We have agricultural societies, which are very much linked to the characteristic that we have borders which defines our ground. This is in, this is out. So from here, we tend to have also the possibility in language to have a no, which also characterized by wars of ground. And in terms of religion, in here we have the first time the notion of funerals and the belief of a life after death. Like these distinctions are back, but they're called spaces because they are proximal big time frames. We come to the next space. It is the commodity space, where we have the industrial area. So all these borders that have been created by the territorial are transcended by the goods that we exchange. And by that we create institutions, and by that we had also the very, very, very fixed ways of organizing our beliefs. And when we come to the last one, is the knowledge space that we just entered about 30 years ago with the rise of the internet and the globalization, where we have a total eclectic way that is melting down everything that we had before. But we also have to know that every space had the other one above it, and it includes it. It's like you have to be a child to become an adult. So you have to have this very archaic hunter and gatherer space to be able to grow up. and what doesn't make with time is that now we're entering in a phase in which the norms that have been created in the commodity space are dissolving, and new tribes arise out of the internet realm as we can gather in the internet. And the big change that we are experiencing is that it doesn't matter where is space, and still time matters a lot. And one thing that religion gives us always is a sense of hope, which is necessary to move on a collaborative way, that we can actually hold on the complexity of growing civilizations, which is needed because the more hope you have, the more trust you have, you can connect to more people. But it changes now from it is not anymore any fixed one. You can be a Buddhist in Germany, you can be a witchcraft person in New York. So the space doesn't matter anymore. And this is something on an evolutionary scale from the truth that there is something in ourselves that keep repeating, and we see it in the mythological figures, makes us dissolve actually in the just pure present of uncertainty. Because in the future we have hope, we have religion. In the past we have science and retrospection and reflection and rationality. So, and in the middle stays just a pure present, where all the mindfulness and all the teachings come to say, okay, well, we just go into blind spot of here now. And this is actually a very, very eternal and very, very difficult space to hold. So I pass it from here.
Okay, guys. So obviously with evolution is about, like, in terms of technical thinking, evolution is about sex and death. It's about organisms that have sex, reproduce themselves, and it's about the difference in their capacity to reproduce, which is limited by obviously their lifespan, their capacity to even reach reproductive age in the first place. And then Kevin made the point that in civilization, you know, there's this aspect of religion which is about controlling the mating game. You know, there's that aspect of it, you know, securing paternity, and securing provisioning. But it's also about this existential terror as well. And that's different between us and the organisms, right? Because, like, a rabbit will run from a fox, but a rabbit doesn't sit by itself and think, oh my God, I'm a finite mortal entity. You know, the rabbit just is there. So religion also comes in here. You could say it's a type of, this is maybe why Zizek says it's an immanent transcendental screen, because to our mind, because we're reflectively aware of death. So that's why it's immanent to our minds in some senses, because just the awareness of death requires that some screen emerges, at least for a certain number of subjectivity, to be able to keep it together and be able to keep moving and keep growing. I think what Daniel said about hope. Now, I really like the systematic analysis that Daniel provided with us, moving through the hunter-gatherer stage, the agricultural stage, the industrial stage, and then the information stage, because this is the evolution of, this is not only the evolution of the idea of religion, but it's also the way in which the idea of the idea of religion provokes a transgression of it to go beyond it. So you would have, for example, the animalistic, totemistic stage in the hunter-gatherer phase, where spirit is kind of everywhere. It's diffuse. There's spirit in rocks. There's spirits in trees. There's spirits everywhere. And then in the agricultural phase, it's kind of like spirit gets condensed. Spirit becomes the spirit of this nation, the spirit which is a unique connection to our people, because that's basically solidifying borders and boundaries, more clearly solidifying borders and boundaries. And then with the industrial age transformation, you could even say that the transgression of the agricultural form of religion is turned into the religion of industry, of science, of capitalism. Giorgio Agamben, great philosopher, said, God didn't die, he was turned into money, for example. So there's this phenomenon. And of course, in Marxist analysis, the way in which we as human beings engage with commodities, Marx thought was of a religious nature, that we engage with the commodity in the same way as what the religious person would engage with, the communion wafer, for example, or something like this, that this is the foundation of commodity fetishism. Now with the information age, I agree, there's this melting of everything, and at the same time, there is this dissolving in the pure present of uncertainty, which is difficult to hold. But I think what this melting of everything and this dissolving of everything is bringing us to is basically, I see the religion of my direct joy, my direct experience. Like heaven is right now. I'm God right now. It's my direct experience of the eternal this moment. It's become much more here and now. Whereas I feel like with the agricultural and the industrial religion, the here and now is always deferred. It's always, with the industrial or the agriculture and the industrial religion, it's always a to come. Like, I will get to heaven and be with God in the afterlife. It's something I'm waiting for. Or in the industrial age, we will get to the secular utopia. It's just around the corner. We'll have the communist revolution. It's to come. Or like even Nietzsche's Overman. Nietzsche's Overman is something to come. It's not here. So I feel like, in some sense, what's going on in the information age is it's become much more now. And so this is bringing us into the problem Daniel brought up, which I think is the fundamental problem of religion and also the fundamental problem of love, is both the capacity to experience and narrate time, and also what do you do with time? Because it's kind of like the one and time are it's like the one reveals itself as time, and then we as subjective experiences try to become one. So like for example, I always say the problem of love is, I love you forever right now. This is how we act. It's like when you're in a relationship with someone, I love you forever. You don't want to imagine the end. I love you forever, but right now, because in all likelihood, of course, the relationship will end, but you just can't bring that to consciousness. So I feel like, in that sense, is it that this transcendental, if the religious side is this transcendental mirage, that I'm in heaven, or I'm with God, or something like that, could it be that mirage is being experienced almost as a hallucination this moment? Like I think about, for example, people who are getting into psychedelics, myself included. When you're in psychedelics and you're on a psychedelic experience, it's kind of like you're with the transcendental mirage this moment. And then And then if religion's second function is also to constantly transgress, constantly push beyond this image, what is this beyond we're trying to transgress? Like, what is the uncertainty we're throwing ourselves into, if that makes sense? Is like, you'll have the subjects who maybe are holding the transcendental image this moment, and then the subjects who still try to push beyond it somehow. So I leave that there.
Yeah, Daniel, I love how you brought it to time, and our experience of time. How do we order time? And what does it mean to relate to time? And yeah, and love, obviously, Cadell being the best example. Love, sex, and death, right? These are the things evolution deals with for human beings, and the things religion deals with. And it's another chapter in the book as well. I also feel like, the pinnacle experiences where we experience the eternal now, the transcendent, the like, oh, this is it. This is it. Instead of like, oh yeah, it's coming or it's out there, is, orgasm, the psychedelic experience, and awareness of mortality. And so why is religion always deferring it? That's something that I always wondered, being raised Catholic myself. What is this game of deferment? Why is it being deferred always? It's like, why can't we just be with it now and then face it? And then what will arise from that? And then later, studying marketing and studying motivational psychology and things like this, it's like, well, the carrot and the stick is a powerful motivational force. If you want human beings to behave in a certain way, and you want to do a type of conditioning, whether it's operant or classical or what have you. So I really wonder about that, and I wonder how we condition ourselves around love in time, knowing that because love takes a kind of faith as well. There's a faith in love, right? We were speaking before this session around the idea of the one and having a soulmate or a completeness in a relationship. And this is almost raised to a religious faith for some people. And in the New Age community, it's the twin flame, is this object of faith. It's an article of faith. And I think ultimately it does serve us in evolving, because if human evolution is about the gradual and sometimes dramatic advance in the awareness of human beings, so the evolution of consciousness in general, it's a lot of evolution is the story of tools. It's the story of technology. Think about chipped flint and cave paintings and those technologies, which were radical at the time, you can imagine. And now we have globalized satellite uplink internet. We have 3D printers, and we have, nuclear weapon delivery systems. Like, the tools and technology have been a huge part of human evolution. And what is it all building towards? What is the telos? If we want to talk teleology, where is this leading? What's the orientation of it? And to my mind, it's really the human nervous system, the human soul, whatever you want to call it, wherever you fall on the spectrum, is exteriorizing or externalizing itself on the earth and in culture through visible and invisible means to give itself enough feedback to, and that's where it's like, to become God, to assuage and placate existential anxiety. Are we still looking for immortality? It's interesting that in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is apparently one of the first epic poems that we have in writing from the ancient Sumerian or that region, forget which exact civilization, but the Epic of Gilgamesh was about trying to become immortal, and the gods trying to stop a human being from doing that. This is the same story in Eden, which comes up in every trialogue. I guess I bring it up in every trialogue. So I'm kind of going way afield here, but to pass it to you, Daniel, I really wonder about what if faith and evolution are really the same thing? They're taking different routes, they have different causal principles. But ultimately, when we fall in love, when we look at society and we're like, wow, we need to do something, we need to advance, progress, change, alter, et cetera, et cetera. What if we're all being driven by the same drive in those areas?
Okay, thank you. I mean, I have to pick up on what Kevin said as well as what Carol said. I mean, what is the carrot of the stick? What is the theology? Do we want to become something like God, something like immortal? I mean, what we also said, I think we touched that also in the book, in the chapter about evolution and religion worldviews, that most of what people are thriving is actually eternity or immortality in some or the other way. It could be like through the transference of the gene. It could be through making an artwork that transcends over time and people remember you, and that's why you are one of the stars in heaven, that people remember you forever. So I think there is this kind of theology. On the other hand, I always have to think about the Buddhist distinctions, that there are gods, there are semi-gods, there are humans, and there are also beings that are very unfortunate because they are like in hell, or they are like in a between phase between hell and human place. And they say that the gods, they're actually thriving only for joy, and then they're very envy from each other, which we can see also from the people that think of themselves they are gods, you know, because they can create everything that they want. And the Buddha state is something that is in a very middle plane, just be human, and that's it. You know, that's like the most fortunate place, because you involve suffering as well as happiness. So from that point, it might lead again to be just in the present moment, you know. But here comes the question on what you desire to fulfill, if there is anything at all. You know, if you want to really desire something to be happy. And this is like the carrot on the stick. And when it comes to money, is actually our most prominent ideology from the industrial area. I once made a research on why ideologies are successful taking over another. And I included the scientific worldview, as well as any religion, as well as any assumptions that drives a system of knowledge as an ideology. And what I found out, that capitalism became more successful as an ideology than religion, because it was more inclusive and it was more equalizing everyone. You know, a Buddhist and a Muslim can be equal on the basis of money and connect through that. So that is why capitalism was like more successful than any religious ideology. And when it comes to what we are doing right now in here, we need access of internet to be connecting to the whole world, you know. So this is like a completely different frame that we are just right now. And this leads me back to think also on John Gapser, because he had also made like a division of 4, where he thought we had first a very archaic phase of humanity, then magical thinking of religion, which is like where the transference happens, then a very mythical phase, and then we have the mental one, which comes with enlightenment and rationality. And what he proposes afterwards is an integral one, that all of them before we can integrate it as a complete being. I'm not sure if that will be the case, because everybody says he's on the top of the evolution, you know, and when he looks back. But on the other hand, yeah, it is really a question of how do we stay present as well as connected as a civilization that has grown over time, and what do we need for systems of knowledge, systems of thoughts, of role models, that we can make this world actually happen by all the chaos that is also happening right now. So I want to see also a very actual role model of thought to embrace the actual situation, because there are eternal truths. But anyways, we are living in this time right now. Yeah, I put it there as an open question to you guys.
Okay. Why is religion constantly deferring? There's the argument for social control, that the religion is constantly deferring because you have to keep the person stuck in a certain model of hope, and then you can control the behavior with this. But there's also sort of, I think, maybe a deeper reason, which is that we have no other choice because existence is so brutal, that we have to defer because what is so insufficient. I think that's a more likely and a more generous model in regards religion as a historical phenomenon. You know, like, what are you going to do if you're in the Middle Ages, or if you're in the ancient world and the conditions are what they are? You know, what are you going to do except defer to some future to come, which hopefully pulls us from the mess we're in? So just by the very nature of what the world is, we have to defer. And then I think people are less willing to defer today because maybe people see more concrete opportunity to do something now. There's more access, there's more openness, there are just more possibilities for action than ever before in history. So people say, let me, how about I get off this donkey with the carrot and go find my own carrot, and I'll just eat it right now. I can actually get my own carrot. Now, I think that in this getting my own carrot, the first thing people seem to be doing, and it comes in the New Age community, as Kevin said, is this raising the other person to the level of the one, you know, the twin flame, whatever it is with the religion. And I do think the way people authentically experience religion today is, or many people experience religion today, is basically through their sexuality, through their expression of their sexuality. I mean, I think strong commitment to monogamy is not that different, even maybe more powerful than strong commitment to monotheism. It's basically saying the same thing, I think, in terms of bodily action. You know, but at the same time, I think that the inherent contradictions and problems in treating another person as the one mean that that search ultimately has to undergo a sublimation. It ultimately has to undergo a transition to something different. And then the question is, you know, if we're all driven by the same drive as you know, for immortality, for some touching of the beyond, as Kevin's suggesting, does that mean that it's sort of imminent, that, you know, you could say imminent to the human condition, that we transcend our sexuality, that we transcend the way in which we deify the other person as the one? You know, is it imminent that the instability in the bond between two people like that creates the necessity to overcome, to transgress? And I would say that in my actual behavior, that's what I have been doing, that the monogamous image is something that I first upheld subjectively, and then I do nothing except try to transgress it. I try to go beyond it. I try to see where I could find some other pattern, which is not the monogamous pattern, but is nonetheless still something interesting, something that goes beyond, you know, but without sort of devolving into a sort of, you know, just some chaotic polyamorous space where there's no deep connection between people, and like you really get to the core of people, like, because you can't sacrifice, you can't sacrifice really deep pursuit of truth for, casual sex or something like that, which I think is where a lot of people struggle. Now, where that thinking leads me is in relationship to sort of Daniel's metaphysics of, the Buddha saying that being human is sort of the best place to be. Is I wonder about that and the giving up of desire, because I don't think we can give up our desire. I think desire is you can't get rid of it. You can't get rid of it. It doesn't matter. You isolate yourself in a cave forever. You can't get rid of it. Desire keep moves, and it's, I think, singular drive. I think it's what I see in the images of religion very broadly is we don't want to be human. Like, we are human, but one of the conditions of being human is I don't want to be human. I want to transcend being human. So it could be we put up the image of God. I want to be with God as a spirit. It could be the image of the singularity today. I don't want to be a human. I want to connect my brain to the internet and be some sort of hyper identity, to be some sort of hyper entity. And we see that today, for example, in the transhumanist religion with things like Neuralink. Neuralink is literally a device that will get hooked into our brains, and they've already got a model of it. They've already worked with it. They've already put it into a pig's brain. They hook the Neuralink to your brain, and then in principle, you should be able to interact in a mental space with others as if you were actually in the same space. So for example, if we were all hooked up by Neuralink, me, you, and all three of us, we would be in like a hyper augmented reality where we would be able to, mentally, ideationally transform our identities, how we like, transform our bodies potentially, maybe experience modes of communication, which we can't do merely through language like here. Like maybe you would be able to transfer to me how it feels to go through a deep breakup, or you would be able to transfer to me what it feels like to whatever it is. What would that drive be? What would that drive be? It would be that drive to transgress the boundary of our humanness, fundamentally, to transgress, to become forms of consciousness which were decoupled from any reference to human beings. And I think that the interesting point Daniel made about evolution is that, and science and certainty about evolution, because that really is the foundation of contemporary science, is that we're certain about evolution, is that We only can be certain of evolution by looking at the past, not by the present moment. So we have a present, I would say, we have a ideology in the present which purports to tell us a certainty about the past. But we don't know what the future present will think about that. We won't know about if we're in some sort of transhuman space of we've transcended the limit of our humanness. We won't know what those forms of consciousness will think about what our ideology is today about the evolution of the universe and stuff like that. Maybe it will be something totally revolutionary, something we can't even think right now about the nature of time and so forth. So I guess I just, before throwing it back to you, Kevin, and maybe get your sort of thoughts on this relationship between religion and evolution. It's like, to me, religion evolves through evolutionary pressures, but then religion itself becomes a motive for higher order evolution. And that's interpreting religion very generally. Like, we're talking about religion in a way that most people don't talk about religion. Like, for example, Daniel saying that capitalism is a more successful religion than any religion because it's more universal, it's more equalizing, which is absolutely true. Capitalism is the universal religion. But then, to me, what goes beyond capitalism potentially is the mechanism of the internet and the Creative Commons, and collaborating in a way that transcends even money and is even more inclusive, maybe even more equalizing than money. We're not there yet, obviously, but clearly the seeds are there. So yeah, I'll throw that to you, Kevin.
Fascinating. I don't know where we're off on this one, but we're hitting the warp 9 right now. So warp speed ahead. A quick side note and just fun fact about myself. I don't know if you're familiar with Jesse Elder, someone I've been following for a while. He's a super charismatic storyteller, high performance coach kind of guy, like an epic entrepreneur. But he makes this distinction between the bifurcating pathways we're approaching in evolution. One being transhumanist merging with AI. So like transhuman, cyborg, AI vibes. And then the other side is ultra human. So it's actually a return to nature, the shamanic, through plant medicine, through developing ourselves and our psychic abilities and our innate mysterium of the body, the alchemical vessel of the flesh. And for my own 2 cents and my gut instinct, I would much rather be on that side. And you can imagine, like in Star Wars, like Obi-Wan Kenobi doesn't even really like using laser pistols and blasters, you know. He trusts in the Force, his intuition. He says it's an inelegant weapon. And he's the baddest motherfucker there is, you know. Even the cyborgs and the robots and the aliens that have all the best tech get their ass kicked by this monk, basically, who just uses psychic powers and nature, right? And wisdom. So that's where I identify. If I had to choose right now, if someone handed me the AI implant, the Neuralink, or they handed me like, hey, let's go into nature, commune with plants and animals and develop your innate abilities. You actually don't need any technology. I choose that. So fun fact there. I think those pathways exist in the human imagination and mythology for a reason. I think religion intimates them. Like, think about what Christ is. Christ is a metahuman. Christ was a metahuman whose emergence from the inside out, like a mycelium, decomposed the strongest empire on earth, who then co-opted some of his teachings and furthered their agenda. But Rome was done when a man beat death, you know? So it's something very interesting. And this is a funny term. I've been talking with some friends and we think deeply about these topics, which it comes up a lot, this whole idea of the future and transhumanism. And, you know, this has to do with the telos of evolution and religion together. Because if the telos of religion is to manifest God and be with God, whether it's in this life, the next, whether it's the here now and you're Buddhist and you're just meditating, or you're communing with the Atman as a yogi and you actually realize your higher self as God. You know, there's all these pathways. You know, that's the religious way. And it's happening because an AI, a general AI, a real AI, which has not emerged yet to our knowledge. Maybe Facebook already is the AI. I don't know. When that emerges, it'll be like Christ. It'll be like God. Its potential is vast, if not limitless, if it has all of Earth's computational power at its fingertips. And in the same way, if tomorrow a human being was like X-Men or the Avengers and had pyrokinesis, telekinesis, telepathy, you know, all the abilities we know exist in mythology, either one of those scenarios would shatter many of the preconcepts present in today's religions. It would shatter many of the preconcepts in today's science and how we understand evolution as the gradual change of genes being passed on for differential advantage and reproduction. And I find that quite interesting, quite exciting, and actually terrifying at the same time, because, you know, what will human beings do if in a Neuralink scenario that you were describing, Cadell? Like, will there be any need for religion and transcendent values if you can interface with people in an augmented or virtual reality and change our body or identity at will? Which seems to me to be part of what if God is an image, the imago, as Jung talked about, it's an archetypal image that's been funneled a lot of power. If God's an image of omnipotence, omniscience, you know, this Neuralink scenario is pretty close to how I can conceive of that in our present reality. If I can change identity at will, have access to information, change and augment my knowledge and my language, you know, and my senses, my very senses, which are the data upon which my consciousness feeds back into myself, you know. So it raises so many questions, and, you know, I feel like this is coming into a whole nother trialogue at this point. But the last point I'll make before I pass it to you, Daniel, as we start to wind into something like a conclusion. I don't know how we're going to come to that. More questions, really, is what I'm arriving at. What if, after all of that radical evolution, whether it's AI, whether it's God, whether it's psychic abilities, you know, evolution taken to its peak, religion taken to its peak, what if we just come back to the most important thing is just human intimacy? That actually that drive for oneness, the drive for sexual connection, but also just the human to human connection you find in a partnership between man and woman is ultimately where all of that is just leading to. Because if you go to those limits, you realize they're empty, the carrot is not satisfying. Ultimately, what comes back into connection is core human intimacy, which I think is one of the ultimate values, if not the ultimate value. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, gentlemen. I think from what came first for me, from what Cadell said, is like there is the search for the one, there is the search for intimacy, and we just fail, especially in our times, to find the one for forever, you know. But as you said, Cadell, it is like everybody is the one at every time, you know, and we strive more to this fulfillment, the more it breaks apart. So I don't know if there is really the possibility to throw this projection of fulfillment of oneself to another that is really satisfying. But when you become like one and everybody is one, I can still see that there is a possibility that we can co-create this world as someone that is in his full potential. And that is, I mean, I think there is this relation that the all-knowing Google makes us see the possibility of an all-knowing human that is connected with telepathy and psychic abilities and so on. And I mean, for myself, I have been experiencing a lot of personal evolution through looking into karmic constellations, especially in the last 2 years. So that the notion of time has been more and more disappearing into the oneness, grabbing pieces of my soul together from my past, healing traumas, and so on. So that your mind and your happiness is just right here and not affected by this past, or by, I mean, past life has been always for me a metaphor of the here and now, because it just appears if there are actually something that bothers you here and now. But if we have like this whole picture of evolution itself, it tells us something, that we are able to see that it is quite enormous, you know. From most humans didn't know that vast memory of time. This is something very extraordinary. And to come to this point and being like with ease with all this history and trying to get further to another evolutionary step, maybe that is not anymore capitalistic, that is not anymore religious, that is not anymore scientific even, you know, but another step that is supported or envisioned by technology, but finds itself again reconnecting with nature. I see that as a possibility that the world can go, as you described it, Kevin, simultaneously. And I mean, there is this need and this very much growing sector in this civilized area, which is like the self-fulfillment or the self-personal evolution, which has been never the case as it is now. People were just working or just get money. And now everybody asks himself, what should I do with my life? Everybody's sitting in Corona lockdown and thinking about the end of the world. And what should I do with my life? Something meaningful, you know, how we can save the earth or whatever. So this fulfillment that comes to a collective question, actually, is on the top of our evolution right now. So far we can look back. And I can't believe, and here we come back to the religion, I can't believe, and I want to believe, that we can make this world. You know, I want to believe that there is an evolution. That is something we should thrive for. Yeah. I leave it there.
Okay. Well, I think in my life, human-to-human connection is the most valuable thing in some way. It's hard to think that sometimes, but I mean, just because relationships are so difficult. But at the same time, it maybe human intimacy with the other, just maybe it is the ultimate value on some level. But I think that it's, can you as a this would be like my version of the overman. Can you be with human intimacy, deep human intimacy, and uncertainty at the same time? That's to me the crucial method. Because to me, what I see is people try to go for human intimacy, but they can only do it with a type of pseudo certainty. That's what I see. And can you be with human intimacy and complete uncertainty at the same time? And I think that to me is I guess that's what I try to embody as an entity, and that's what I've tried to embody as an entity. So that's I guess where I am in my process. At the same time, you know, when Daniel said, you know, we fail to find the one forever, and everybody is the one at the same time. Everyone is the one at every time. You know, I imagine being in a intimate partner conflict, you know, like where things are getting really rough. And then you say, everybody is the one at every time, you know, like it would have absolutely no efficacy whatsoever. But I think that just, I still think that the way forward is this striving. Is what we're striving for is ultimately a grasp of ourself. And then when we have, and I've intimated that before, where that answer has just been so obvious to me. And then can you be with that sense, can you be so deeply with yourself that you can be intimate with others, even more deeply intimate with others than people who think they're being intimate are, and just be absolutely uncertain and be absolutely knowing that that's the gift. The gift is that it's not certain. That's why it's so precious. It's so improbable. And if you can be in that energy, I feel like that would be the ultimate transgression of the original religious image, you know, which tried to get us to lock ourselves in absolute certainty. If that makes sense. So I guess that's really how I would like to conclude my thoughts, is that there's this image of the one, which is the religious image, and you want it to be certain. And I would say that the transgression of that image for absolute uncertainty, and yet you're still have a knowledge of self that you can love, to me, that would be the overman. And to live like that would be what I offer as, in my reflections and in my life, that would be what I offer as not only the evolution of religion, but also the religious motive of evolution. So I'll pass that to Kevin.
So are you trying to say that you want to be certain about uncertainty as the ultimate gift that's certainly aiding our intimacy? There's a great pun somewhere here, or some kind of wordplay.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh.
You can achieve that because you have a depth of self that's so rich. It's you're not building your castle on sand.
Right. I love that. Yeah, I mean, this is what all the Eastern religions have pointed out, that the Western religions, you kind of got to dig into the apocryphal stuff to find, but knowledge of self, and therefore love of self, is a royal road to a good life. And I think, you know, you can go to a cave in the Himalayas and separate yourself from all intimacy with other humans and just be intimate with God and nature. But I think for the modern, which we're all modern, if you're watching this on an internet connection, you're very much modern, postmodern, some might say, you know, your intimacy is going to be with the tribe, the village, the institutions, the lovers, the people in your life, and the systems those people cluster around. And so, yeah, I think there's great wisdom in what you're saying. And I tend to agree. If you can be okay with uncertainty, and detach or practice non-attachment to the desires and some of the loops that like the desire for certainty can create within reason, because too much uncertainty is chaos, and that can be quite traumatic on the nervous system chronically. So there is this golden zone of certainty and intimacy and bargaining that within yourself, although nothing's lost. It's not a bargain where anything's lost. It's actually a lot to gain. It's a richness, a fullness of being, and a fullness of time. This is a great mystical concept, which is the fullness of time within itself. You know, William Blake said we can experience eternity in a moment and all of matter in a grain of sand, because perception and consciousness can do this really wild fractaling. So that moment with a lover, the one, a moment of intimacy can be worth a lifetime of mediocre, lukewarm interaction, because there's a spiraling out of that moment and it fills a fullness. And this is, I think, what all beings are seeking, unconsciously or consciously at all times, is to be with that fullness and live from it, not for it, right? We're not bargaining to get it. We actually want to make that our wellspring, our source, our center of the mandala, so we can emanate out from that. And I think the great maps of the self, which there are many types and flavors, they speak about that. The center is in intimacy with God. God is self-same with the self, capital S. And the self longs to be with God. So the self longs to be with the self. And it's like this, it's a mind fuck from a pure linguistic point of view, but in those rare moments, at the moment of orgasm, when the mind goes blank, in the psychedelic experience, alone in the wilderness, when you're moved by great art and you have great emotion flowing through your body, what Freud called the Titanic feeling, I think we're there. We're just remembering it. And so, yeah, my concluding thought is that having been deeply religious in part of my life and having been deeply evolutionary, they're all doing the same thing. And no matter which direction you come to, you're going to evolve and you're going to relate to transcendent values. And my wish for myself and all of us is that we do that in a good way that benefits others to do their own version of that with minimizing harm as much as we can. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. I think there's a great deal that the uncertainty on one hand is very much what we have here and now, like all the concepts like staying in this moment, and we're thriving towards experiencing the moment. And most of the religion and mystical practices, they also lead you towards just be, not any becoming anymore, but just be. And whatever state that is, where you just finish moving, it is always keeping you just being present, which is the most difficult for our minds, because it's our mind that tends to go into the illusion of the future or the illusion also of the past, which both can be just flexible and changeable. But if you go into the present moment, which you can experience while having a good sex, or while experiencing psychedelics, or practicing meditation and so on, the more you stay present, the more the borders between what is inside and what is outside and disappear. So you feel more connected, you feel like this intimacy, which you can experience it with a partner, but you can also experience it with everything that you first of all comes to your mind, which you have to let go again. So it's also a question of your focus or your intention. But how to hold this state is actually something that perpetuates the uncertainty, because you're not looking into the future, you're not looking into the past, which requires such a stable person, You know, the security is then in yourself, while having like all the uncertainty that might come up with you still engaging in the world. And this has been required in the past, from my past, a lot of nervous reactions too, because I tend to go that way, and it's such a difficult way to just stay so present every time, where everything can change so fast. As you said, it leads to total chaos if you don't have like this golden ratio to your own certainty about what you are, or what you're actually here for. You know, I still try to figure that out. So I can't say for myself that having this certainty about myself has been difficult, and to allow a present moment has been very lately more into ease, is just because of personal growth, because of healing bonds, you know, that put me in a space that I'm right now. So to conclude this about religion, science, I think really that the new religion is basically the here and now, and the one in oneself, which perpetuates on one hand the uncertainty in the outside world. And I find it fascinating how you said how you can hold the space of the uncertainty while having intimacy, which is created when you are just present. I think this is maybe one of the most crucial questions of our last decades, that have been so much around uncertainties. Yeah, I'll put it there.
I'll just add, because I think it's just to sort of say that, feel like it's worth saying that to be with uncertainty and intimacy at the same time, if you are a self, a consciousness that has put in the work to get to that potential within yourself, I do think that what must be added to that is you do have to have a ton of responsibility and wisdom and care for the other, because the other won't necessarily be capable of doing that, or they might have desires of doing that but can't do it. And there also might be parts in yourself which are still not capable of doing that, even if you think you're capable of doing that. So it's very difficult, obviously, or else it would have already been done. And I think that Kevin's principle of minimizing harm as much as possible, if that's to be a principle to live by or to work with, it requires a huge amount of self-responsibility and ability to care for the other genuinely. The paradox is that if you have put in the amount of self-work required to do this, you won't be the type of person to selfishly manipulate or abuse or distort in a way that it could really do deep spiritual harm to someone. Because there's nothing more deeply harmful to someone's spirit than deception, manipulation, you know, some deep, brutal violation of someone's character and personhood. So I'll just say that, but I think that it's a really important thing to think on, is this capacity to be stoical in massive uncertainty and massive intimacy. And let's leave it there.
The eye of the storm, massive
That's
intimacy.
the eye of the storm.
massive uncertainty. They exist together. I pictured the hurricane's eye, you know, that's where it happens. That's where the action is. Well, amazing. This has been a wild ride, gentlemen. I mean, we've been all over the place, and these trilogues just keep getting more potent. So for all the family over there,